Hi, everyone, and welcome to How to Achieve Face-Melting Content Marketing ROI. My name is Jason Miller. I am the Global Content Marketing Leader here at LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, coming to you from London. I just moved to London, so this is my first time presenting a webinar from London. I want to tell you a couple things. I've been here for 4 weeks, and I'm loving the culture, and I'm truly on a mission to become immerse myself into a new culture so I can really become a global marketer. So anyway, thank you all for joining us today. A little bit about myself, very quickly. If you've never seen me speak before, I tend to speak a little bit fast, but we have a lot of material to cover today. If I am going too fast, please just tell me to slow down. But that's me, Jason Miller. I'm the author of a book called Welcome to the Funnel, Proving Tactics to Turn Your Social Media and Content Marketing Up to 11. And in my spare time, I shoot concert photography, so a lot of the photos that you see in here are photos that I took myself. There was some questioning about what face melting actually means, and I wanted to clarify that very quickly. So I'm a big heavy metal guy. I love metal, and what the definition of face melting to me is the condition in which, due to an extreme exposure to an event of epic awesomeness, one loses all perception of space and time, including but not limited to a brief lapse in physical awareness. So what that means is that is the feeling of amazing content marketing ROI, which I'm going to share with you today. I call it face-melting content marketing ROI, and let's dive right in here. So the hashtag today, easy, hashtag face-melting ROI, and I double-checked this. This hashtag has never been used before in the history of Twitter. So we own this conversation today until someone else uses it. I don't know. Anyway, so please tweet along, follow along, and at the end of the presentation, I will pick 2 of my favorite tweets, and I will send you a copy, a Kindle version or a physical copy of my book. I will let you know, whichever one you prefer, but please tweet along, and if you find anything interesting, which I hope you will, please do share. So, really quick, we're not here to talk about LinkedIn per se. I'm here to talk about content marketing, but I want to talk about why content is so important to me in my job here at LinkedIn. And so this is really key, and why content should be, or why LinkedIn should be part of every content marketing strategy moving forward. So for the first time in the history of media, you can engage with the world's professionals all in one place, right? This is, if you have content marketing, if you have content and you are not sharing it and promoting it on LinkedIn, then I think you're missing opportunities. This is marketing to the professional mindset. This is different than other social networks. Other social networks, I think people spend time on, but when you're on LinkedIn, you invest time. You're here to be inspired, to learn, to be better at the job you have, to find new opportunities, of course, but to know what's going on in your network, with the companies that matter the most to you in the industries that you follow, to stay on top of trends. So that's key. And some numbers for you really quickly. 414 million plus professionals are on LinkedIn. That is the largest global community of professionals. And finally, I just want to share this with you, that our members are seeking out content, right? So professionals engage with a purpose and with the content that they consume. 9 billion content impressions per week on LinkedIn. Opportunity, folks. 15 times more content postings than job postings in the feed. So this preconception that LinkedIn is only for job seekers is not true. And then finally, 57% of that engagement happens over mobile. And of course, I hope we all know the importance of having that consistent content experience across the 3 different screens, right? So, with that being said, let's dive in. We got a lot to cover, and I got 45 minutes when I might go over. If you do have questions, please type them into the box. I'll do my best to get to them live. If I don't get to them, I promise to do a blog and follow up with your questions. So please get those in. Let's jump in here. I'm in London. This is London Calling. This is one of the most iconic album covers ever produced in the world, right? So this album cover is just as recognizable in the punk rock community, in the rock and roll community, as Starbucks or Apple logos in the world of consumers. So it was recorded about 8 miles north of where the LinkedIn office is, and it's hailed as one of the greatest rock albums ever created. And the importance of this, actually, it's really interesting. The story behind this photo is that the bass player, Paul Simonon, was very upset because they were playing a show in New York City, and the bouncers would not let the crowd stand up out of their seats in a punk rock show. So he bashed his Fender bass guitar and smashed on the stage. And the photographer who took this picture, she didn't want the photo released because she thought it was out of focus. But it turned out that Joe Strummer saw this and wanted it on the album cover, and now it's this iconic visual masterpiece that in 2002, Q Magazine named it the greatest rock and roll photo ever taken. But more on to why I'm talking about London Calling here. So the Clash, they were a special type of punk rock band, a special type of rock and roll band. In fact, the record company, CBS Records / Sony Music, they came up with a rather hyperbolic marketing phrase, and they called them the only band that matters. And it kind of stuck with them because there was a strain of truth to this, right? This is transparency and authentic. They were a genuine band. The Clash, they cut through the drivel and the mindlessness of the new wave, and they came across as genuine, as opposed to manufactured pop or pretentious art rock that was really popular at the time. The band walked their walk, their working class talk, and they even went into debt to keep their concert tickets low and their album prices low. And in fact, 3 albums in, they still hadn't broke. So they were broke. They were flat broke when they recorded this iconic album, London Calling. And they didn't actually break till 3 years later. But the importance here of the Clash and why I think they are applicable to content marketing is because they said something important. And I think with all the drivel, I should say, all the drivel of new wave, you could look at that as a lot of the noise, a lot of the keyword stuff crap that's happening out there in the content space, right? So a lesson from the Clash is to say something important, right? The Clash, especially Joe Strummer, they wanted to start a conversation. They stood for something. They aligned their values of the band with their audience, which is a key component to what we should be doing as B2B marketers, aligning the values of your brand with your content and the audience so they have something to latch onto, something to follow, right? If you don't think that your brand, if you think your brand is too boring to be to gain followers, I think you're simply thinking too transactionally, right? You need to give them a reason to follow you. So Joe Strummer famously quoted, I think people ought to know that we're anti-fascist, we're anti-violence, we're anti-racist, and we're pro-creative. We're against ignorance. This was their mission statement, and it broke through, right? Other punk bands, on the flip side of that, the Sex Pistols, they stood for complete anarchy, and they wanted to do nothing except throw a brick at your head, right? So what happened? The Sex Pistols imploded after one album. The Clash gave us a decade plus of incredible music, right? But I think, again, the importance here is Joe Strummer was a disruptor. And he famously said, if you don't like the world, then change it. And this is really important because I think as a content marketer, I think you really need to break through. And if you want to do something, if you want to change the world, you really need to think differently. You need to think like the Clash. You need to think about what is important, what you stand for, what you don't stand for. Create that content, align the values with your audience, and launch it, right? And there's actually, it's interesting because we're on the music-themed floor of the LinkedIn office here in London. Somehow I ended up here, and it worked out well. But we have a Clash room, all kind of dedicated and decked out around the Clash. And one of the big quotes on the wall here is one of my favorites from Joe Strummer. It says, "People can change anything they want to, and that means everything in the world." And I think that's really powerful. And the lesson here, the lesson from everything I've talked about, from the Clash breaking through, from Joe Strummer becoming a thought leader, is that when you lead conversations that matter, you give customers a reason to follow you. And again, if that seems beyond your purview, maybe it's because you see your business as a transaction rather than as a brand that adds value to people's lives. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does mean you'll forever compete on price rather than who you are and why you exist. So let's jump into the state of content. This is in 4 different parts here. Just like the double live album of The Clash here, there's 4 parts. So 4 sides. We're going to get to structure. We're going to get to content ideas, inspiration, how we drive ROI. I'm going to show you some examples. I'm going to show you some people who I think are doing amazing work with this big rock content concept that I came up with. And then we'll wrap it up with tying it all together from an integrated marketing approach. So let's jump right in with content calling. This is going to give us a state of where we're at today. And again, remember, this is the most important thing I can tell you. When you lead conversations that matter, you give audiences a reason to follow you. That's what all this stuff is about. That's what content marketing at the top of the funnel is about. If you don't have a thought leadership angle, you are simply going to get lost in a world of brochure marketing, which is clearly not not driving results. So these are results specifically to the UK, but I think they can be broadly applied around the world. This comes to us from Content Marketing World and Marketing Profs. They do an annual survey every year, and they put out the research for us marketers to figure out what the state of content marketing is for us. So the latest report says that 66% of marketers say they expect their organization's content marketing budget to increase in the next 12 months. That's good news. Good time to be a content marketer. But and 88% say they will produce more content in 2016 than they did in 2015. Again, good news. But 34% of UK marketers say that organizations are effective at content marketing. Only 34%, and that's compared to 42% the previous year. So we're going down. So we're creating more content, but our effectiveness is going down. We're going the complete wrong way. This is not good. And then this comes from Forrester. Gartner, I think, said this. 60% of B2B content goes unused. That is astonishing. So we're producing more content, good. Our effectiveness is going down, bad, and 60% of what we're producing is going unused. That's awful. This is frightening. These are frightening stats. So what's the answer? Well, I will tell you. Not more content, but more relevant content. Ask yourself, every time you think of an idea to create a piece of content, ask yourself, do I create this damn piece of content or not? If it does not fall into the category of solving a problem, answering a question, inspiring your prospects and customers to move down that path in the customer journey, or if it is not somewhat entertaining, then you probably don't want to produce this, right? I call this slide Rage Against Irrelevance, and this is from an internet survey that came out a couple of years ago, and they found out that 44% of overall respondents said they would consider ending a brand relationship because of irrelevant promotions. An additional 22% say they would definitely defect from the brand. That is bad news, folks. That means every time you push a piece of content out there, if it's not relevant, you could lose that precious subscriber or that follower, and potentially forever. So again, be very, very careful and only produce the content that makes sense, right? If it ain't relevant, it's just noise, as I always like to say. So ask yourself, at the top of the funnel, what conversation do you want to own? At LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, when I started here 3 years ago, the conversation was simple. How do I market effectively on LinkedIn? When you type that into the search engine, what happened? We were on page 17 or 18, something crazy like that. And you know what they say with Google, where's the best place to hide a dead body? On page 2 of Google, right? Anyway, but my job was to own this conversation. It was a conversation we had to own. And when you typed in how do I market effectively on LinkedIn, what happened was you got on page 1, you got Social Media Examiner, Social Media Today, Social Media Explorer, every blog under the sun telling our story for us, which is important. I have friends over there. They're great people, and they do a fantastic job. But they're controlling my conversation, the conversation that LinkedIn Marketing Solutions needs to own. And I'm going to go after that conversation and get it back. And the second way to look at this is, what is that number one question on your customers' and prospects' minds, or your prospects' minds? What is that number one burning question? You find that conversation you want to own, it's got to be that number one question, and then you attack it. How do you attack it? You attack it with a big rock, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. But I want to talk about keywords very quickly, because I think a lot of folks are saying that keywords are dead, and I think saying anything is dead is so passé, right? So keywords are just as important as they used to be. You just have to be smart about how you apply them to your content strategy. So this is a quick, this comes from Moz.com, who are pretty much the smartest SEO folks I know, and they put together this little template on how to put the keywords throughout your content to seed this so that the search engines will number one, will crawl this effectively. Number two, they will see that you're not trying to stuff keywords into your content and trying to buck the system, if you will. And then three, you're optimizing your content to be found. So that's super, super important. And then the second part of that is that Moz also found out that 70% of searches were long-tail keywords. So a keyword would be a single word or 2 words. Anything longer than 3 words is technically a long-tail keyword. So there's a huge opportunity there, right? So the longer the keyword, the more specific the search, the further down the buying process that person is. So there's a huge opportunity not only on these, I guess, like these single keywords, which It could be online advertising, could be B2B marketing. This could be huge, highly competitive keywords, but look outside of those for these long tail keywords that are very specific. And I think those are much easier to create content to rank for and drive traffic back. But anyway, and I want to tell you about this cool little tool that I found just recently called Answer the Public. Now, if you want to do some keyword research and lay the foundation for this a very solid content marketing strategy moving forward, you have to go in and you have to do the keyword research. You absolutely have to. But if you don't have time and you need to do some quick and dirty keyword research for some blog ideas or for some quick and dirty content ebooks, this Answer the Public does a great job. You just type in your keywords or your product name or whatever, and then it pulls out this beautiful visual interpretation of all types of questions. It's a little bit creepy because this guy never stops looking at you, but it works beautifully. I love this tool. So Answer the Public. Give these guys a shout out too. They're pretty good on social. So anyway, during my time at Marketo, I used to run global content and social at Marketo before I joined LinkedIn. We came up with this concept called the Big Rock. Now, the Big Rock is the answer to the question of how do I produce not more content, but more relevant content. The Big Rock is a substantial piece of content. It could be an ebook, a video. It's something that you're going to put a substantial investment into, and you're going to go after a conversation in social. That number one burning question, you're going to attack that with a Big Rock, right? The search engine's job is has a single job, is to deliver the most relevant answer to a question that's typed into the search box or query, and your job as a content marketer is to simply be that best answer, right? So, but I know what you're thinking. Oh, this Big Rock, it's too much effort in one thing. Well, the Big Rock is going to be this kind of stake in the ground. And then you're going to slice and dice this thing. We call this the turkey analogy, right? So, and we actually use this lingo at LinkedIn, the Big Rock and the turkey slices. And it may sound like really silly, but I promise you, man, this is like, it's memorable. It might sound silly, and people say, oh, you have the Big Rock, you should have little tiny boulders coming off. I'm like, that makes too much sense. I would never do that. Big rocks and turkey slices is memorable, it's fun, and the sales team loves it, and it just makes sense for us. Anyway, so that one Big Rock is going to be enough content to fuel your social and demand gen channels for up to a quarter and sometimes even longer, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. But that one Big Rock piece of content, you're going to slice and dice into blogs, infographics, webinars, videos, SlideShare presentations, etc. Once you create this Big Rock, and I'll show you exactly what this looks like, you can reverse engineer this thing and get the entire Big Rock out there in these sort of like little digestible, snackable pieces, right? And these are kind of like the tentacles that bring it back to the Big Rock. But I'll show you how this works in a second. This is what it looks like when it fuels your content hub specifically on LinkedIn. The Big Rock and the turkey slices, which fuel the company page, sponsored updates, LinkedIn groups, and of course SlideShare, B2B underdog, if you will. So here we are. 3 years ago today. Actually, my 3-year anniversary at LinkedIn is coming up on July 15th, which is also my birthday. I started on my birthday. How crazy is that? So this is the Big Rock. When I came to LinkedIn, as I mentioned before, that burning question was, how do I market effectively on LinkedIn? So we instead of like thinking like a publisher, which is the trend that only gets you so far, we wanted to publish like a publisher. So I literally wrote the book on how to market effectively on LinkedIn. Wrote it very strategically instead of an instruction manual, because you know what happens when you get an instruction manual, you throw it in the trash, go to YouTube. We don't want that to happen. This is top of funnel content. This is very broad, and it applies to CMOs, to directors, to practitioners, all across the organization there. So that's the Big Rock, and this is what it looks like when we slice and dice this thing. So within the Big Rock, we also included each chapter was broken up with thought leadership interviews. So we interviewed an expert from the space that related to the topic at hand of that chapter. And the beautiful thing is that it added third-party validation. We're not trying to sell you anything. This is very helpful content. Jay Baer, a good friend of mine from the States, famously said, sell something, you get a customer for a day, but help someone, you get a customer for life. And I think that's what top-of-funnel content does the best, and that was the aim of this piece of content. So we have this giant Big Rock piece of content, 55 pages of everything you'd ever want to know about marketing effectively on LinkedIn, and then we slice and dice this thing into ebooks, infographics, SlideShare decks. We pulled out influencer interviews and put it on the blog. We did a podcast. We did 3 webinars around the world, et cetera, et cetera. And the beauty of this, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but you're LinkedIn. You have this big content team. You can do this. Not the case. There were 2 people on my team when we did this. 2 people and a couple of agency partners. And I'll give you exact numbers, man. This didn't cost as much as you think it did. But I'll also give you the ROI on it, which will blow your mind. I promise you that. But the idea is all this stuff was, all these derivative pieces of content were simply lifted out of the big rock, right? And then one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life is I had to take a piece of content global. And I will tell you this, I don't even know what the hell this says. This is the Portuguese version. But, you know, I trusted my global leads to take this piece of content and localize it. And that brings up a much bigger conversation of when you're creating this big rock. You know, we created them out of San Francisco and tried to take them global. And of course, the main thing to keep in mind is to have this global mindset. Like, you don't want to put the Brooklyn Bridge or the Golden Gate Bridge in the cover, and you want to make the skeleton, the table of contents, universal, so that it's much easier to localize. And I can't tell you how important it is to bring in the global geos and the leads as early in as possible. Like, when you come up with the content outline and a concept for the design, that's when you start sharing it, and you get input and you move forward very quickly. But that's a whole other story. So that's slide 1. Slide 2 is called Running with the Content. Usually I get some sort of a laugh, but I can't hear anybody, so maybe just tweet something if you think, if you recognize Van Halen's a single from 1981. Anyway, Running with the Content. Let's get started. One of the other biggest questions I get around content marketing is, what does success look like of a big rock piece of content? Well, I call this the Bat Out of Hell strategy, right? What is the Bat Out of Hell strategy? Well, Bat Out of Hell is a record that came out in 1976. I think it's the 6th biggest selling record of all time in the world. This is astonishing. And why is that? Because this thing takes an always-on approach, right? So this thing, I bought this on 8-track, I bought it on cassette, I bought it on vinyl, CD, you know, I bought the digital download, I went to see the tour. It's always on, right? I'm going to go see the 40th anniversary tour, the residency in Vegas, you know. The record company has this always-on approach. And so they're not going to think in terms of a campaign. They're going to think of, how do I keep repurposing this content, revising this content, keeping it relevant to my core audience. I will likely buy this record 7 or 8 more times before I die, and I'm fine with that as long as they keep improving it and giving me different formats. But that's how you have to think about your campaigns or your content, not in a campaign mindset, but in an always-on mindset. The turkey slices are the always-on element to the big rock, which is the core of the campaign. If you run campaigns, what happens when that campaign ends? Well, then your engagement can drop to 0, right? And that's awful. But if you have an always-on approach, this evergreen piece of content, then you never get an engagement level of 0, which is super important. So this is what it looks like in the B2B sense. Now, I've seen demand gen waterfall models that look more complicated than plans for a nuclear reactor. This is what it looks like at its core. This is turkey slices, non-gated at the top, right, going into the big rock, which has got a form, which is for lead capture. Now, the idea is you stay top of mind with the turkey slices as these little derivative, always-on pieces of content through organic posts, through paid posts, through native advertising, through blogging, through every type of inbound activity you could think, plus a little bit of outbound when we talk about paid. So if someone's not ready to fill out this form and give you their information, then you simply stay top of mind with the turkey slices. Once they do fill out that form, hopefully they become a marketing qualified lead, which is the MQL. If they are not marketing qualified leads, then we put them into a nurture track and we nurture them with more turkey slices. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing until they become a marketing qualified lead, and then the SDRs qualify them, sales closes the deal, and ultimately they turn to revenue. All this stuff is tracked at the very top of the funnel through to the final sale with codes and unique URLs and forms and marketing automation platforms. So it's not as difficult as you think it is. I can promise you that. So this, I call this for those about to launch. Fire! That's like AC/DC. Hopefully you guys got that. Anyway, this is the always-on strategy according to the mighty AC/DC. And again, so when we launch a big rock piece of content, we don't just launch it on the blog and walk away. That's the wrong thing that's the wrong way to look at that. In fact, I see so many content marketers every single day. They do a big, beautiful piece of content, they put it on the blog, and they walk away and they move on to the next one. No, I'm going to launch this with my team like we would a product. This is a substantial investment, a substantial piece of content. I want to make sure that every person in the organization who can get eyeballs, the right eyeballs on this piece of content, is involved. From PR to SEO to sales, you name it. We put balloons on chairs, we print this thing out, we celebrate this big rock piece of content. And then we're going to launch it, and we're going to launch it big, like fire the cannons, if you will. So there are two things I'm trying to do here. Number one, I'm trying to create an epic, relevant piece of content that can go global, right? But the second thing I'm trying to do is to create a piece of content that proves that LinkedIn Marketing Solutions works as a viable content amplification tool, right? So remember, I created this original piece of content 3 years ago, but the formula set in place the same steps we take for each big rock, which is email, blog, in-mail, company page, sponsored updates, SlideShare, display, PPC, Twitter, etc. Everything at my disposal, paid, organic, inbound, outbound, every possible thing we can do. This big rock will have, it will touch this big rock and push it forward. These are the results out of the gate. Now, these are exploding pie charts. Hopefully, you've never seen that before. This is what happens when you tell your designer to put an Easter egg in your presentation. But what you have here is this is the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to LinkedIn, the original Big Rock piece of content we created years ago. This is the first 30 days out of the gate. And why is this important? Well, I want to show you something. What you see here on the right is the global reach. 64% of that came out of the U.S. That makes sense because we launched out of the U.S. But we didn't launch this thing globally in the first 30 days. But it was so relevant and such a core piece of content with all the derivative pieces that it went global literally overnight. Now, we would eventually launch this in EMEA and APAC, of course, and Latin America. And I will show you those numbers a little bit later on. But this thing took off, and I think that's a really good sign of relevance, of pure content relevance. And now, if you look at the chart on the left, this is where the money comes in. This is the most important part of the Big Rock. So these are marketing qualified leads, MQLs, being driven by the piece of content. Now, this is only the first 30 days. 34% came from the email launch. That makes sense because we did a huge email blast. I don't like calling it a blast. We did a huge email launch with announcing the guide, and then right behind that, you see 32% of the MQLs coming in from the blog. So why is that? Well, that's because we launched it on the blog. We drove the email back to the blog, which drove to the download page, right? So 32% coming from the blog, and then right behind that, you have InMail. Very, very, very powerful tool for Big Rocks. In fact, InMail has a 100% deliverability rate and a 90-day exclusive window, share a voice when you send that. So really, really, really powerful for a Big Rock piece of content like this. Anyway, my point being, if you look at the same chart 60 days out, what happens is that email becomes number 2 and the blog becomes number 1. And why does that happen? Well, because the email reach starts to decay, right? Because folks have opened their email, they've gotten it, it's starting to go away. But what's happening is the blog starts to take over as the number 1 MQL driver because you have this turkey slice approach. So we launched the Big Rock on the blog, and then each week following, we launch a turkey slice from the ebook, and it could be an infographic, a SlideShare, all driving traffic back to the original Big Rock, the original post for downloads, right? Now, if you look at this 90 days out, what happens? Well, email reach has decayed. You might be running out of turkey slices with the blog. Now you turn on native advertising, sponsored updates. Now you're paying to promote your content past your initial audience reach, which now native advertising becomes the number 1 MQL driver. This can go on and on and on. And I will tell you, we launched this guide, the LinkedIn, the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to LinkedIn. We launched this almost 3 years ago, and quarter over quarter over quarter, it's our number 1 MQL driver. It never stops. Every year, we refresh this thing, update it just like you would a book on Amazon, a best-selling book, and it's still our number 1 MQL driver to date. Only replaced in December of 2014 by the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Thought Leadership, which was its follow-up. I guess you could say the sophomore release. But yeah, and I think the bigger story here is that a lot of folks will tell you that inbound marketing is all you need, and you'll clearly see that inbound marketing only gets you so far. It gets you to your initial audience. If you want to break through to that coveted second-degree connections, the audience beyond, then you need to put some paid behind it. Like inbound marketing alone is like hanging out with the same group of high school kids your entire life. I hated high school. I don't want to go back to that experience. I was a heavy metal kid. I got picked on a lot. So I like to move beyond my initial reach, and I think that with the targeting available in social today, it's unprecedented. So who's ready for this is what happens in the office right before we launch the Big Rock? Hopefully you all know who that is. But, I forgot to tell you. So, this is Mr. Yngwie Malmsteen. He's a Swedish neoclassical guitar master. He has been known to melt faces with his blistering guitar solos. I took this photo 7 weeks ago in Oakland. Mr. Eddie Van Halen also documented. He's documented in Wikipedia as a face melter, and the original face melter, my man, Mr. Jimi Hendrix. So face melting, content marketing, ROI, that's where we're headed here. But in the history of the world, there's only been one face that's actually been melted, and that was at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark. But that's not the point here, folks. 18,000% ROI. One piece of content. Cost around $25,000 put together, influenced $4.6 million in bookings. Do the rough math, it's about 18,000% ROI, one piece of content. Why was it so successful? Because it cut to the core of pure relevancy. It answered the number one question. It was the best question. It answered the number one question on our customers' minds better than our competition. And we own this conversation moving forward. So some more data. 73% of all of our marketing qualified leads at LinkedIn are driven by content, right? And fully 1/3 of those MQLs come from big rock pieces like the one I just showed you. So we aim for one big rock per quarter. As Doug Kessler famously says, one home run per quarter, but think of it like that. So 3 years in, you ask, what do I have to show for that? Well, I have to show what I call an owned media empire. And I think this is important because now we're building this empire around the sophisticated marketer, which is almost like a movement. And we control the messaging, we control the conversation, and we're very proud. Like, this is branded content that we're so proud of. We put our name on. We're proud of LinkedIn to support this. And you can see here we have the top 3, which we just launched, the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Content Marketing a month or so ago. It was the fastest downloaded piece of content in LinkedIn Marketing Solutions history. I think it had about 500 or 600 downloads in the first 30 or 40 minutes, and for a B2B piece, that's pretty substantial. We launched a podcast, which is now in its 3rd season, just crossed 30,000 downloads, and you can see my guest of the debut, I don't know what the hell I'm doing with podcasts. I just jumped on there and had a conversation about building this own media empire with my buddy Chris Bueller, who's the CEO of Scorch, who we built this whole empire with. And it was the number 3 marketing podcast in the country, in the U.S. when we launched this, and stayed on top of iTunes homepage, new and noteworthy, for 2 weeks. This is just the power of really good relevant content. Then we split it into verticals, and so we brought the Sophisticated Marketer brand into vertical content, and then also we split it off into some very specific B2B crash course series. But this is the foundation moving forward. Like, this is where we tell our story. This is where we tell our story in a very helpful, meaningful way that both inspires, educates, and even entertains at some points. And again, as I mentioned before, taking this content global, you see the original Sophisticated Marketer's Guide, and then you see the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Thought Leadership, and then you see the latest one, the Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Content Marketing, which we just launched in India. So again, this thing is going global, and these are one piece of content that can go all around the world. The original Sophisticated Marketer's Guide is now in 7 different languages. It's pretty crazy. So a couple other things I wanted to touch on. Like, in order to really break through and be this disruptor, be the Joe Strummer, be the punk rock of B2B content marketing, you really have to explore new formats. So this is a gentleman named Jeff Augustine, who is actually doing the voiceover for, we're doing an audio book version of the latest Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to Content Marketing. Why not, right? Why read when you can have somebody do it for you, I always say. And then responsive design. This is always a challenge for B2B marketers. It's the PDF has not evolved in 15 or 20 years, right? So how do you get responsive design on for a mobile device that's easy to read, that looks like a Kindle, right? Well, you have to hand code it. So we're hand coding some of our best performing pieces of content, and it will be a fully immersive, responsive experience across all 3 screens. And I'll tell you the coolest thing is when we were experimenting with this, when you see somebody download the mobile responsive file and they click on it and they think they're going to have this awful PDF pinching experience, but they see the page actually flip. They actually take like a knee-jerk reaction because they're just astonished on how beautiful this looks. So I'm really excited about that. But there's just no technology out there that can do it. You have to hand code it. And then again, we took it a step further. And I'll talk about this at the end when I talk about KISS. But how do you create this movement with your content? Like you build the owned media empire. But how do you continue it on? How do you bring people closer? How do you make them feel like they're part of something? So it's sort of like this whole sophisticated marketer movement that we've started, and we invited marketers to be part of this. Like join the sophisticated marketer movement. We will send you a decal, and you can enter to win this whole sophisticated marketer swag pack. And then what happened next? It actually went a little bit viral. I wouldn't say completely viral. But we started people talking about being better at marketing, being inspired. We introduced them to other folks to leverage and answer their questions. But we wanted to lead this movement of being a sophisticated marketer. So some really quick examples who I think is doing this well. This is Microsoft. This was in the presentation before the big announcement. I can promise you that. But I think they take a great approach to the Big Rock content example I talked about. This is the Innovator's Guide to Modern Note-Taking, which they're going against. They're owning the conversation around business note-taking, right? They're going against Evernote and whatnot. I mean, I use OneNote because it's just easy for me, and I like to keep my ideas on the fly. And then you see here what they did. There's the Big Rock, and then you see the landing page, and you see the turkey slices, which could be a blog post, and then you see a beautiful infographic they did, all driving traffic back to that original Big Rock. This is going to load. Oh, well, we missed that. There's a beautiful infographic supposed to load here, but I'll send it to you later. But it was a really cool infographic where they talked about the history of note-taking, and some of the biggest and boldest ideas throughout history have been written on the back of napkins or in some really odd places. And the argument is, what if that person had OneNote to document this with photos and the shareability and the social sharing and interactivity, and the collaboration. Really, really cool stuff. And then here's some results, and I got this from my friend over at Microsoft, who actually sent over real tangible results on how the Big Rock and turkey slice approach actually worked for them. And so they found out that using turkey slices to drive gated content can improve landing page conversion up to 6x, meaning that little buffer, that turkey slice used as a buffer between the click on the ad and the actual form to download, having this buffer in there increased their conversion by 6x. It increased quality traffic to product sites. The CTAs from one of their Big Rocks drove 64% of the traffic to one major product sites during the month of February 2016. 64% from one Big Rock. That's insane. And then for those out there, for the haters on the Big Rock who might be questioning whether or not anyone's reading this thing all the way through, this is amazing. Using Docalytics, Microsoft found that their content team found that 57% of ebook readers were getting all the way to the last page of the book. That's astonishing. That's the power of relevant content. I think B2B. I'm a reader, man. I'm not so much on a video. I'm not so much of a video guy. I'm more of a reader. But video is a whole other conversation. Who else do I think is doing it well? LeadMD, market automation experts. My friend Justin Gray, who's the CEO and founder, they did a really fun campaign called Monsters of Funnel. I thought this is a brilliant example of a Big Rock. They created it in-house. They had a little bit of fun with it. Monsters Rock, Monsters of Funnel. You can see why I dig this. But you see the turkey slices here. They created a specific piece of content based on the Big Rock for SlideShare. They added a video element to it. They interviewed experts and influencers in the space. I think this is such a beautiful example. And then they brought in the influencers, right? And they made these fun little avatars and from illustrated avatars. And what you saw happen was the influencers who were included here started to switch out their avatars in social, and it started this kind of, and they were sharing it. It picked up this whole kind of viral movement, so that now you reached these folks' audiences as well as got their validation behind it. So I love that. So here are the results. I'm going to click through this really quickly, but the results cost was $5,500. You can see the total acquired names. These are all straight from LeadMD. They were kind enough to provide this with me, but I want to show you my favorite metrics here at the end. Influenced pipeline, $232,000. Source pipeline, oh, I skipped ahead too quickly. Sorry about that. Let me get back to that. Oh, I got to go through all my bills one more time. Source pipeline, 12,000, but look at this. Total one pipeline, 244,000. That's face melting ROI, if you will. And I love they're taking it a step further. That was so successful. They're going to expand upon it, and they just launched. I think just last week they launched Monsters of Funnel Part 2. It's called Back to Stack. But they built up. They have this countdown page, and I think that's cool. Like, how many B2B marketers are thinking about content in this way, to where people get so excited there's a countdown page, and you can almost pre-sell it. I love that. I love the example from LeadMD. Very smart marketers over there. So. To recap the Big Rock turkey slice conversation, I will tell you 3 ways I figured out how to create a Big Rock. Number 1, we talked about keyword research from the ground up. Find that conversation, check how competitive it is, and check to see if you can actually make a dent in that conversation. If not, then go a little bit long tail on it. Another quick way for to build a Big Rock is to look at your blog and find or look at the content you have. And find an existing theme throughout that content, and then start to roll it up. I'll show you an example of that in a second. And then a third example, a third great way to create Big Rock content. I think this is quite brilliant. I saw a company called Pantheon do this, where they took, they flipped bottom of funnel content to the top, and they basically took like case studies, which are very boring and don't usually work at the bottom of the funnel, or don't usually work at the top of the funnel. Sorry, they work great at the bottom of the funnel. And they flipped it on their head, and they just tweaked it a little bit, and they turned them into success stories. And we all know that storytelling is super hot in content. But what if you could take these case studies and take them out of that traditional case study format, design it beautifully, and turn it into inspirational stories and sell it at the top of the funnel? I think that works well. I love that idea, and I think it's a quick win. This is what the plan looks like. This is a Gantt chart in the form of a mixing console. This is Easter egg number 2. And what you see here is the actual plan. 1 Big Rock fueling your content, your social, and your demand gen channels for up to a quarter. I'm going through this pretty quick, so I will share these slides with you and the recording, of course. But back to the presentation. This is Mr. David Bowie, 1978-79 era, Ziggy Stardust. He's backstage at a show in London, and a Rolling Stone reporter comes up to David and asks him, says, "Mr. Bowie, are you original?" And David turns to him and says, "Absolutely not." And he says, "The only art I'll ever study is stuff that I can steal from." And I love that quote, and I will tell you why I think that's important, because I don't think there's any original ideas anymore, sadly enough. But I think the key to content success is to find, steal, borrow other ideas, put your own unique spin on it, and make it your own. So I will leave you with this and ask you, what is your Big Rock, and what are your turkey slices? So I have a couple more parts to this really quickly. We're going to run a little bit over, so hopefully you guys can stick around for about 7 to 10 more minutes. But the big question, where does all of this content live? Where does the Big Rock and the turkey slices live? I say it's got to live on the blog, right? So the blog is certainly not the sexiest piece of social media, but it is the most important. I say the blog is the social media rug that ties the room together. The dude abides. Now, don't confuse a blog with a I'm just losing my train of thought here. Don't confuse a blog with a resource center. These are two different things. A resource center is what lives on your website. It's an indexed library of your content, right? It's searchable. It's important. It's key for the structure of your site and key for SEO. But a blog is much different. A blog is a running narrative. It's got time dates. It's got stamps. It's got time and stamp dates. It's got times and dates and comments and likes and shares and plus ones, and it's living, it's breathing, it's moving in one direction, and it's indexed within seconds by the search engines, right? So this is where the content lives. This is where the Big Rock launches. This is where the turkey slices live. This is where your content marketing hub all begins, right? So how do you keep that mixed up? How do you keep it differentiated? Well, this is called the blogging food groups. This comes from Rick Burns at HubSpot. In 2009, he wrote this beautiful blog post called The Blogging Food Groups, and it didn't get much traction. So I kind of put my own spin on it, and I wanted to blow it up bigger. Brought it to Marketo. We use it at Marketo. Brought it to LinkedIn. We use it here at LinkedIn. Now, you don't have to follow this exactly, but this is a really great way to think about your blog and the content on your blog and to mix it up. So much like you would get tired of eating the same lunch every day, I think your audience can get very bored with the same content every single day on your blog. So how do you mix it up? You mix it up just like you would with the blogging food groups. And we call it a steady diet of quality content for your blog. So let me walk you through this very quickly. Monday, these are in no particular order because I'm going to start with Raisin Brand content on Monday. Now, we call it Raisin Brand content because the stuff is easy to dish out. It's 5 tips for this, 5 tips for this. You want to ease your audience into your week of content on the blog, right? So you don't know if they had a rough weekend, they might have a hangover or something. Ease them into the weekend with something light, something that's easy to dish out like some Raisin Bran. Because Tuesday, we're going to go into what we call spinach content. Now, spinach content, we call it spinach content because it's a little bit more difficult to chew, but it's good for you. So this is a little bit more of a thought leadership angle. This could be some research because you're setting them up for Wednesday, which we call the roast post. The roast post is something you're going to chew on a little bit longer. It's a very substantial piece of content. Could be, a good 1,500-word meaty blog post that somebody's going to save. They're going to read this thing maybe later on, but they're going to chew on it for a little bit longer. That sets up Thursday, which we call Tabasco post. A Tabasco content, a Tabasco post. This is where you take a very strong opinion on something, right? Or maybe call somebody out. Start a little fire, a little bit of fire on the tongue. That's why we call it Tabasco. And that leads up to Friday, which is my favorite day of the week, and we call it chocolate cake content. Now, chocolate cake content is fun content. It could be a fun infographic. I remember I created an infographic called Kittens versus Bacon. I thought it was going to be the most viral infographic ever. That didn't work out so well, but it was still a fun piece of content, right? And the reason I like to have a fun piece of content on Friday is because it sends your audience into their weekend with a smile on their face. And I think that that's the way to get them to come back. So, man, I've got like another 7 minutes left here. But so I'm going to walk you through a week of blogging food groups using heavy metal blog posts that I put together and show you how you can roll this up. So Monday, this is Raisin Brand content, how to appreciate heavy metal. Very simple, very visual, very fun. Ease them into the week, right? Because Tuesday we got how heavy metal is keeping us sane, a very thought leadership piece talking about how Black Sabbath fans live vicariously through their heavy metal so they don't become crazy crazy people in the world, but they live vicariously through their heavy metal, which keeps them sane. And this is from The Atlantic, so this is pretty good thought leadership if you ask me. And then we go into Wednesday, the roast post. This is a very long-tail keyword research or keyword topic, the history of the new wave of British heavy metal. If you look at this post, it ranks #1 for this keyword phrase, which I love. It's about 1,200 to 1,500 words, lots of link backs, lots of visuals. This is how you own a conversation very quickly with one piece of content. In fact, Moz.com did some research, and they analyzed over 10,000 of the top blog posts on page 1 of Google, and they found out that if you want to rank on page 1, you need to have your blog post start between 1,200 to 1,500 words. So start there. That's the roast. It's beautiful. You can't do this every week, but you can certainly do it once a month. That goes into Tabasco. This is a post called 5 70s metal bands who are better than Black Sabbath. That's impossible because Black Sabbath invented heavy metal. I commented on this post all 27 times. You can see that at the top there. On to Friday. Called 10 this is chocolate cake. This is how easy it is to pull together something fun. This is called 10 hysterically funny reviews of Led Zeppelin 4 by 10 people who hate it. As I was being retargeted for the new Led Zeppelin album, I found out on Amazon that there are 5,000 4-star reviews for Led Zeppelin 4, arguably the greatest rock album ever created, but there were, rightfully so, but there were also like 100 1-star reviews, and I thought, how in the hell is that even possible? So I pulled them together, and it started to read sort of like a comedy routine. But I thought, oh, this would be a really good, fun chocolate cake piece of content. This is the second biggest trafficked piece on my personal blog, next to 5 amazing photos of Kiss without makeup in the 70s. Again, long tail keyword. I'm on page 1. That was an easy one. But I will share with you one review. This is an actual review I put in the post from a customer on Amazon that says, yes, I know some people gave this album 5 stars, but I've seen some 5-star reviews for the movie Howard the Duck here, which is, hopefully there's some laughter happening that, again, I just can't hear. But again, leaving a smile on your audience's face going into the weekend. That is the key here. I brought one bonus piece. Oh, and so ideally, if you think about the content on your blog, find relevant 5 relevant blog posts, you can roll them up into one big rock. Those 5 posts there, if those were hypothetically on one blog, you could roll that into an ebook called Heavy Metal Music in Britain. Great for lead gen and great for big rock content. So an example of how we did it at LinkedIn, I wrote a blog post for Content Marketing Institute a year or so ago called The New Era of the Hybrid Marketer. It did so well that we split this out into 5 different blog posts, and we put them out one blog post a week on the LinkedIn blog, and then we rolled them all together into an ebook. And even though all of the content was already out there for the taking, when we rolled it up and packaged it nicely, it became our 7th most downloaded piece of content in the history of LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. So again, God forbid we have any more tabs open in Google Chrome. We don't need that. We need everything packaged up into a nice ebook format. I think I brought one extra piece of chocolate cake because what is today, Wednesday? All right, that doesn't really make any sense. I thought today was Friday. But bonus chocolate cake piece. This is I had this idea. It came to me when I was watching Guns N' Roses in Las Vegas. I went into John Miller's office at Marketo. No relation. He'll be the first to tell you that, not me. But John's a brilliant marketer. I walked into his office and said, John, I have a great idea for a piece of chocolate cake content called 5 Content Marketing Lessons from Guns N' Roses. He said, I don't hate it. And so we went full steam ahead with it. But what would happen next? Guns N' Roses shared my blog post. Guns N' Roses shared a Marketo marketing automation blog post, which means that Axl Rose may or may not be consuming my content. I don't know. That's not the point. But you are thinking to yourself, what in the hell does the Guns N' Roses audience have to do with marketing automation? Absolutely nothing. But I would tell you what, this post put a smile on our audience's face, and they came back Monday, and they went through this entire journey of the blogging food groups with us again. And that was mission accomplished. So this is the final part. We're going to wrap this up in just 4 to 5 minutes. This is side number 4, called Rock and Roll All Day. Oh, this is a typo. It's supposed to say Rock and Roll All Night and Market Every Day. So let me break it down for you, folks. I'm gonna get serious here for a second. If there's one thing I've learned over the past 5 or 6 years of being a B2B marketer is that I don't think I was ever supposed to be a B2B marketer. In fact, I don't think I ever at one point in my career said, I can't wait to become a B2B marketer, but I'm here and I love it and it makes me a better person. But the one thing I learned is that if you're a one-dimensional marketer, you're easily disposable, right? And what does that mean? That means if you are an email marketing expert, I don't think that's a good way forward. Not picking on email. I'm not picking on email marketing experts. I'm picking on anyone who claims to be an expert in any one field. What I learned through my startup days at Marketo was that you don't have to be an expert in any one marketing discipline. But what is really, really helpful and will advance your career is if you understand multiple disciplines. So I sat down. The way that the team was set up at Marketo was I sat next to SEO, I sat next to demand gen, email, the community manager, etc. We were all sitting together, we were all chatting together, we were all communicating with one another, and I learned from these folks. So I'm not an email marketing expert per se, but I know how to write a subject line, and I know how to write a compelling email for my content. I'm not necessarily an SEO expert, but I understand very well how the search engines interpret my content, and I know how to optimize to be found. And I know that I'm not an expert in demand generation, but I understand how content fuels demand generation. So I think if you understand all these disciplines, how they work together into this full integrated marketing experience, that's what's going to be successful moving forward. So I would urge you to never stop learning, but to learn as much as you possibly can about other marketing disciplines that affect your success, because that is the way forward. So with that being said, I came up with an idea of what the marketing team of the future looks like, and I'm using my favorite rock band of all time, KISS, to demonstrate this. And this is my finale. We'll be out of here in 3 minutes, I promise you. So I guess a couple years ago I was in Vegas photographing my favorite rock band of all time, KISS, and it hit me. I figured this out. Like, here's 4 guys on stage, each with their own unique role in the band, right? But they're playing together seamlessly to deliver this experience, which is the song. And I thought, man, these guys figured this out 40 years ago. How can we as marketers take this and apply this? So here it is. Put your seatbelts on, folks. This is what the organization of the future is going to look like. I call this the marketing team of the future as demonstrated by KISS. You have SEO, social, content, demand gen, PR, and most importantly, community. All these folks sitting together, talking together, synced up beautifully to deliver what we're looking for, which is a marketing experience moving forward, right? What does this look like in action? Well, again, as I mentioned, the 4 unique band members working together to deliver an amazing product. You have SEO, represented by Mr. Peter Criss. The drummer of the band lays the foundation of the band, right, the backbeat of the band, just as SEO lays the groundwork of your content strategy. And that feeds directly into Mr. Paul Stanley, who's the lead singer of KISS, who could represent your social media team, who is the voice and tone of the organization, right? Also fuels your content. And then you have Mr. Gene Simmons, who's the core of the band. He's the primary songwriter. He's the guy who sings the songs that Paul can't sing because Paul's voice is too damn high. And he fuels demand generation, represented here by Mr. Ace Frehley, who ties it all together with a sweet, face-melting guitar solo, right? So this is what it looks like, folks. This is how it works out every day. These four people have to be communicating. They have to be sitting next to each other. The bigger the company, the bigger the silos, the bigger the problems, you have to have these folks talking to one another. Because what happens here is demand generation says, Ace Frehley says here to Gene Simmons, Gene, I need some more content. This stuff's performing very well. Gene says, no problem. Then Gene reaches out. Paul says, Paul, can we A/B test some of this stuff? What's the conversation out in social we need to own? And then Peter Criss, the drummer, optimizes that entire conversation and then to be found, and then makes sure that you're talking about the exact conversation, and then optimizes your website. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Whoop. I don't know what happened there. Did I skip? Did we run out of time? Anyway, let's see if I can get this working again. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that little hiccup there. So the other key is that these are their big rocks, right? This is what they consistently deliver content their fans want to consume and share in the form of albums. Now, granted, we need to put out content more than once every 2 years, but this is key. These are their big rocks. And you'll notice down there at the bottom, I put Monster twice. That's because there's a Brazilian version with a bonus DVD that I really liked. And then, of course, they took it on the road, right? This is important because PR has to sit with these folks, too. This is Mr. Doc McGee. He's on tour with KISS. He guides their vision as the world's hottest band. So my question to you, marketers, is your PR team communicating with your social and content team? Because if they're not, you could have some trouble, right? Because someone like a Brian Solis, who is a analyst in the PR world, but he's also a social and content influencer, Brian does not have time for one conversation, let alone 3 different conversations. So you have to have these synced up. There's too much overlap between social, content, analysts, and influencers in the space. So have your PR team synced up with your content and social team. And then finally, they deliver this amazing experience on tour, which could be called event marketing. And then most importantly, they built a thriving community. Now, I'm a card-carrying member of the KISS Army. I have been for 30 years. I can go anywhere around the world and connect with other KISS members and feel like I'm at home, right? I could go to a KISS show in France or Poland and connect with other members of the KISS community. So they make me feel like I'm part of something bigger. So back to the community, back to the sophisticated marketer movement I talked about earlier, ask yourself with your community, the community you build around your organization, around your brand, do the members of that community feel like they're part of something bigger? At Marketo, we had the Marketing Nation, which we built up, and we had it was a place where marketers could lean on other marketers, they could get their questions answered, and it was all this huge community of of fans who can share and advocate your own good content. I think if you're missing that, then you're simply missing a major opportunity. So I will wrap it up with this. This is my final point here. I took this photo of Mr. Paul Stanley, and I think he sums it up perfectly. Content marketing at the top of the funnel. He was looking at me square in the face, I think, and he spoke into my eyes. He said, Jason, people want a thrill, people want a spectacle, and people love to be entertained. And I think that sums up what content marketing is all about right now, and where people find success. So you'll notice that is a white guitar pick on the end of Mr. Paul Stanley's tongue. He spit that out. It hit me in the face, dropped to the floor. The girl next to me picked it up. I still do not have that guitar pick, but I will get it one day. This is my book. Again, hopefully you guys tweeted some stuff out. I'll pick a couple tweets and send out a couple of books if you're interested. This is everything I know about content marketing and social rolled up into one. And of course, this is my next book coming out in a couple of months called Alive and Amplified, a rock and roll guide for developing your personal brand. And with that, I think we have about 15 seconds for questions. So I will dive in to try to get to one or two questions. If you guys don't mind hanging out. And of course, if I don't get to your question, I promise you I will follow up on a blog post or on Twitter, or feel free. I'm Jason Miller, CA on Twitter, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn if you just say where we chatted at. Let's see, Laura. Looks like you got the first question. We released a big rock piece on UX last year. Is it too late to send out the turkey slices? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You can reverse engineer this thing at any given point. Again, if you didn't do any turkey slices, then you're in a really good spot, because as long as that guide is updated, as long as you go through there and make sure that the quotes and dates and times are updated and relevant, then you can slice and dice that thing and breathe a whole new life into that. So great question, Laura. Tim, hi, Jason. Your drive for focus and relevance is clear. I'm reading these unedited, by the way, so hopefully there's no curse words. Do you have or have advice on multiple lots of different requirements? Oh, yes. So the question is, do you have or have advice around multiple internal stakeholders with lots of different requirements that potentially interfere with the desired focus? How is a big rock decided and agreed on? Very, very good question. That one got up to the queue pretty quick. That's a difficult one, but I'm going to take it, I think. So here's the thing. As I mentioned before, with every piece of content, if you do the keyword research, then you can identify the conversations, and it's almost like the data is at your fingertips, right? The content that every content marketer needs to create, the questions that we need to answer, it's all out there in social for the taking. So how do you identify it? You identify it by doing keyword research. You identify it by through what's working in PPC for you. You identify it by the conversations in the community, and you look at what keywords are driving traffic to your site, what keywords are driving traffic to your competitor's site, and then you narrow it down to the most important one that can have the biggest impact that you can answer better than anyone else, right? So, for example, online advertising is a keyword that's owned by Microsoft, right? So that's an interesting keyword. If you look at it's highly competitive. That's something that's important to me, but I would never go after it, because I would have to create content every single day around online advertising for the next 6 months to even make a dent. And then when I got there, Google Trends could show that online advertising isn't even relevant to that conversation. So I would say, go after, maybe extend that long tail a little bit. For example, B2B marketing, a very tough one, but LinkedIn marketing, B2B marketing on LinkedIn, content marketing, B2B content marketing on LinkedIn. Those are very specific, and those are conversations I can own and create a big rock around. So we're 2 minutes after the hour. I'm going to try to get to 2 more here really quick. Philippe asks, how important is having an existing audience to the success of your content marketing, and what would you recommend small companies do with Tony? Here's the thing. There's a book called Content Inc. by Joe Pulizzi that talks about building the audience and then creating the content. But if you need to really do the opposite, but Content Inc. is brilliant, by the way, so definitely give that a read. I would say if you create that one big rock piece of content that answers that biggest question, then it's almost like if a CEO of a company writes a book, right? The Sophisticated Marketer's Guide to LinkedIn, every big rock piece of content we produce could be a book that we put on Amazon for sale, right? But we choose to give it away for free. So you think about it as a thought leadership angle, and as answering that question and this big piece of relevant content. You're writing a book for your audience to own the conversation, to control the conversation, to give people a reason to follow you. So I think if you don't have an audience, you will build one if you do that big rock piece of content right and put a little bit of paid behind it, and then tag a bunch of influencers. Think about, identify the most influential people in the space, identify the partners who you can include, and possibly get them to share it out. I think the most important thing moving forward for content marketers is to build an audience, and you do that through relevant content, thought leadership, and solving problems. So I would say if you have zero audience, 3 years ago I had zero audience. I had 51 Twitter followers, right? I don't know what I have now, but I built an audience because I work hard at it, and I answer questions, and I help marketers, and I like to do that. So I think it's not going to happen overnight, but if you do have budget, it can happen. It can happen a lot quicker. I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to call it. So thanks, everyone, for sticking around. I don't know what the etiquette in the UK is for going 5 minutes over, but hopefully I'm not offending anyone. Steve asks, do we get confused with the difference between content marketing and the promotion of content? That's a good question. I would say content marketing and the promotion of content are the same thing. I would say in order to be effective at content marketing, you need to promote your content. So that's a good question, and that's probably like something I'd have to dig into deeper. But I'd say it's the same thing. I'd say, if you asked me 3 or 4 years ago, lead gen or brand awareness, I'd say lead gen all day long. I'd say create a piece of content and gate it every time. But now I'd say you need a mix of both. So I think there has to be content marketing is organic, content marketing is paid, content marketing is inbound, it's outbound, it's native advertising, it's everything. So as Seth Godin famously said, content marketing is the only marketing that's left. Anyway, hopefully, Steve, that answered your question. Not tweet me and call me out on this. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much. Looks like we got some good questions. I will get to the rest of these. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you found some value in this. And we'll hope to see you next time. Look out for the follow-up email, and please let me know if you have any questions.